At the peak of the Cold War, when one false move could ignite World War III, American pilots secretly flew Soviet fighter planes. Veiled beneath the Nevada desert, U.S. Air Force pilots were suiting up and strapping themselves into MiG-23 Floggers, the Soviet Union's dreaded interceptor, and taking them aloft. The cockpit was foreign, Russian script all over, the ejection seat manual they couldn't understand, a red star on the wing that ought to have chilled their blood. For more than a decade, almost 6,000 American aviators came to know how to handle the enemy's finest fighter. They couldn't reveal to their wives, kids, and fellow airmen what they actually did for a living. It was called Constant Peg, and it was one of the most ambitious intelligence endeavors in the history of mankind. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Wing Time, and share this legendary story with other aviation enthusiasts. Ring that notification bell so you never miss a new upload from us. Now, let's see how America secretly discovered the enemy's fighter. To appreciate why America wanted so badly to have this jet, you have to know what the MiG-23 represented. The Soviet MiG-23 Flogger was designed in the late 1960s to counter American aircraft like the F-4 Phantom II and the F-111 Aardvark. This wasn't just an upgrade, this was revolutionary. The MiG-23's most distinctive feature was its swing wings of variable geometry. Wings were swept forward for maximum lift during takeoff. At high speed, they swept back by an enormous distance, forming a supersonic dart from the airplane. The performance was incredible. Mach 2.35 at high altitude, over 1,500 miles per hour. Service ceiling well in excess of 60,000 feet. The big Tamansky R-29 turbojet provided the power to push this behemoth from sea level to 35,000 feet in under 3 minutes. The MiG-23 featured state-of-the-art Sapphire 23D radar with 45-kilometer detection and infrared search and track sensors. Radar-guarded R-23 missiles for beyond visual range engagements, R-60 infrared missiles for close-range attacks, and a 23mm cannon were standard equipment. The Soviet Union produced over 5,000 of them and exported hundreds worldwide. Syria, Iraq, and Warsaw Pact countries lined up for deliveries. Wherever American soldiers would be sent, MiG-23s waited. Combat exposure was a promise and an issue. Syrian MiG-23s dueling Israeli F-15s and F-16s over Bekaa Valley proved that in capable hands, the Flogger was actually lethal. To America, the question became urgent. How good was this plane really? And could American aviators outmaneuver it in case the Cold War turned hot? By the mid-1970s, the MiG-23 was NATO's worst nightmare. Intelligence reports offered the image of a fast, powerful interceptor with beyond visual range capability. On paper, it challenged not only older American fighters like the F-4 Phantom, but even newer cutting-edge fighters like the F-15 Eagle. The military strategists needed more than intelligence reports. They needed to know exactly how the MiG-23 worked, how its systems functioned, and most importantly, how to beat it. The question was simple. How do you study an enemy aircraft trapped behind the Iron Curtain? American engineers might study photographs and test wreckage recovered from combat. They might model on computers with guesstimated parameters. But none of that was like taking a plane flight. Knowing how it flew, how its weapons were operated, and what combat felt like could only be learned by getting behind the flight stick. Sometimes geopolitics offers up surprises. The turning point came from Egypt. Egypt had been the Soviet Union's main Middle Eastern ally for decades. Egyptian pilots flew Soviet aircraft, were taught by Soviet instructors, and flew hundreds of MiGs, including MiG-23 Floggers. But in the mid-70s, President Anwar Sadat had had enough of his Soviet benefactors. It was a relationship of one way only. Moscow provided arms with strings. Soviet advisors controlled everything: training, strategy, and maintenance. American diplomats arrived in Cairo with an attractive offer: advanced military aid, cutting-edge American weapons, and a partnership that would reposition Egypt in the Middle East. America wanted something in return: access to Egypt's Soviet intelligence. The sale began humbly and grew. There were technical manuals, thousands of pages of Soviet classified manuals. Then, pilot debriefings were conducted by Egyptian pilots who flew MiG-23s in training and combat. But the coup de grace was an actual MiG-23. As part of the secret Operation Have-Pad, with President Sadat's approval, Egypt provided the United States with something never before cited: a complete, operational MiG-23 Flogger. Logistics were boggling. The plane was disassembled with care, crated onto transport aircraft, and shipped halfway around the world without anyone being the slightest bit wiser. Egyptian Soviet advisors couldn't imagine. Warsaw Pact spies couldn't suspect. In a Nevada hangar, hidden from the world, American technicians worked day and night to reassemble their prize. Every bolt had to be exact. Every system had to perform exactly like it would if it were in Soviet possession. And when they first fired that Tumansky engine on American soil, the beginning of one of the greatest intelligence operations in U.S. history was underway. Far out in the Nevada desert, in a non-existent base, something extraordinary was being constructed. The 4477th Test and Evaluation Squadron, operational code name Red Eagles, was the most peculiar military unit in American history. Their formal name was Realistic Threat Simulation. Their real mission was to pilot America's covert fleet of Soviet aircraft. Constant peg security was total. Pilots assigned to duty were subjected to intense background checks and signed classification agreements with severe criminal penalties. They were not allowed to discuss their work with anyone, not their wives, not their kids, or their fellow pilots. The cover headline was simple: routine training exercises at Nellis Air Force Base. The truth was stunning. Every morning, American pilots walked into hangars filled with Russian aircraft. MiG-17s, MiG-21s, and the jewel of them all, the MiG-23 Flogger. The learning curve was steep. Soviet aircraft employed different rules than American fighters. Flight controls were reversed. Weapon systems employed an unknown logic. Avionics employed entirely different processes. American pilots had to rewire their brains. They studied translated Soviet tactical writings and learned to think like Soviet pilots, aware of Soviet vulnerabilities and capabilities. The MiG-23 posed special challenges. Its swing-wing design meant flight characteristics were radically changed with wing position. The high-performance engine demanded care in throttle handling. Weapon systems were complicated, but required precise procedures. From 1977 through 1988, Constant Peg operated in utmost secrecy. Nearly 6,000 American aircrew rotated through it: F-15 Eagle pilots, F-16 Fighting Falcon operators, Navy FA-18 Hornet crews, even A-10 pilots who might one day be facing MiGs. All learned the same lesson: Soviet aircraft were neither invincible superweapons nor third-world playthings. They were functional machines with definite strengths and weaknesses, flown by men who committed human mistakes. Captain Jennifer Viper Reeves was one of the first American women to fly MiG-23 for Constant Peg. Her initial flight was an eye-opener. The first thing that hits you is the acceleration, she recalled. You fire that afterburner and it shoots you into another universe. The Flogger's strengths were apparent at once. It possessed an incredible climb rate, embarrassing even the F-15 Eagle in vertical performance. Its swing-wing design enabled it flexibility that fixed-wing fighters could not match. At high speed and altitude, it was a true interceptor terror. The radar and missile gear, when operating effectively, were to be feared. R-23, beyond visual range missiles, could strike targets at ranges that made dogfighting a ridiculous idea. Soviet doctrine was all about hit and run, rapidly climb, shoot and run, and hide. But U.S. pilots found it had fundamental flaws. Cockpit visibility was crudely limited. Slit-like windows and armored glass meant flying half-blind. During turning combat, you could lose sight of enemy aircraft and never get them back. Flight characteristics changed wildly depending on configuration and speed. Low-speed configuration with extended wings, stable but slow flight. High-speed configuration with swept wings, fast but less responsive than American dogfighting-capable fighters. High angle of attack maneuvering was risky. Push too hard and the plane would be forced into controlled flight, from which it never returned. Avionics were potent, but tempestuous. Soviet engineering favored capability over consistency. Systems working magnificently in optimal conditions broke under stress. Sophistication of the MiG-23 demanded highly experienced pilots and a great deal of support infrastructure. Sophisticated systems in less capable hands were burdens. Faulty as it was, the MiG-23 offered the most valuable lesson American pilots learned. Potential enemies were humans who controlled human-made machines with weaknesses to be exploited. The lessons of constant peg would soon be tested. January 17, 1991. Operation Desert Storm began with gigantic air battles against Iraqi troops. Among Iraqi defenders were Iraqi Air Force MiG-23 Floggers, the same aircraft American pilots had secretly flown for over a decade. Captain Rick Clouseau Tolini, in an F-15C Eagle, observed two Iraqi MiG-23s climbing towards his formation on January 19th. Red Eagle's practice over the years became automatic by reflex. Tolini understood just what the Iraqis were attempting: a classic Soviet doctrine intercept. Climb rapidly, gain above hostile formation, and dive down with beyond visual range missiles. But Tolini had flown the MiG-23 personally. He was familiar with its radar limitations, missile attack profile, and evasion maneuvers. When Iraqis fired R-23 missiles, Tolini was coming out of a turn, countering the attack with experience gained in Nevada. His return attack was immediate and lethal. Two AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles launched at maximum range. Both MiG-23s were lost. All such encounters took place in Iraqi airspace. American pilots trained against real MiG-23s defeated Iraqi enemies with superior technology, training, and experience. The final score was fatal for Iraq. At least 35 aircraft were lost to air-to-air combat. American losses? 0. This wasn't luck or just superior equipment. This was the result of America's most covert training program. The MiG-23 made its final operational sortie with the Russian Air Force in the mid-1990s. The vast majority of the 5,000-plus produced now sit in storage or museums, swing wings perpetually stuck in time. But Constant Peg's legacy still influences American aviation today. Tactics acquired against MiG-23s became standard doctrine for American fighter pilots. Experience garnered in piloting enemy planes influenced a whole generation of pilots. Intelligence techniques supported the development of better American planes and weapons. Most importantly, Constant Peg established a principle followed to the present day in U.S. military training. The optimal way to defeat an adversary is to understand them completely. Pilots now train with simulators and aggressor squadrons against real-world threats. But it started in Nevada, where pilots learned to fly Soviet-captured jets. Classification levels have been reduced over the years. Some of the participants can now share their experiences freely, but many of the facts remain classified, and veterans never actually discussed their deployment. Their legacy lives on in each American fighter pilot who takes to the skies with confidence due to improved training and experience that there is no enemy aircraft that can't be defeated. The greatest Cold War spying success wasn't stolen documents or intercepts. It was an American pilot strapping himself into a Soviet fighter and discovering exactly how the enemy thought. Each classified manual was smuggled out of Egypt. Each secret flight over Nevada. Each American pilot who learned to think like a Soviet contributed to the victory won, not by nuclear weapons, but by knowledge. The MiG-23 Flogger was designed to fight America. It ended up showing America how to win. What are some other great stories in aviation history we should explore? Leave tips in the comments. We love hearing from our Wing Time family. If this story took your breath away, give this video a like. Share it with all your friends who love military aviation history. And don't forget to subscribe to Wing Time for even more great stories. Until next time, watch the skies. This is Wing Time. Thank you for watching.